Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Lower Providence Township Board of Supervisors for Wednesday evening, April 1st, 2015. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, Deb. Will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Mr. Sergini.
Here.
Mr. Duffy.
Here.
Mrs. Ekman.
Here.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Mrs. Zimmerman.
Here.
Thank you. Prior to the meeting this evening, an executive session was held to discuss personnel and legal matters. The first item on the agenda this evening is the consent agenda. It consists of approval of the minutes of our last meeting in March, as well as fiscal matters, including a treasurer's report and cash flow report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2A on the agenda this evening is our first presentation. It's a check presentation to the Methacton Post-Prom Committee, and representing the Post-Prom Committee this evening are Dana Reddington and Karen Kilgore. So if you would come up, please. I'm pleased to present you this evening with the check on behalf of all the residents of Lower Providence, and thank you for the wonderful work that you do with the Post-Prom. It's a fantastic event that serves to keep our children safe. So thank you very much, and ask you to say a few words.
Thank you. On behalf of Karen, myself, and Kim Beam, who's our third co-coordinator who couldn't be here tonight, we can't thank you enough for the support of the township. Chief Carroll, one of our biggest fans, and the feeling is mutual. It's been a great supporter through we're in our 16th year. Thanks to the efforts of the businesses, community, parents, we're able to keep over 800 kids safe on prom night. Statistically, one of the riskiest nights in the life of a teenager. We do that by giving them an opportunity to do lots of fun activities, things that they probably hadn't done since they were little, big inflatables, athletic events, food, tons of food, and we provide pretty good prizes as an incentive to keep them there all night. And they have to stay all night in order to be eligible for the prizes. It's a pretty big operation, and it's one that we couldn't do alone. We have committees and chair people, but it takes over 400 volunteers to put this event on every year. Again, the support is overwhelming, but just kind of as a warning, Karen and Kim, this is their 4th year running this event. This is my 2nd. I've been involved for 5 total as a committee chair in one form or another. We're all stepping down this year, as are several of our committee chairs, so we just wanted to put the word out. You don't have to be a Methacton parent. We have parents who are involved whose kids have long since graduated, but they believe in the cause so much that they stay all night and help us pull it off. But we're a little concerned that this could be the last year because we haven't really seen a lot of interest in people who kind of want to take that next step and run things. So anybody who's interested, please let us know. And I'm going to leave you with this little flyer inviting everyone to our walkthrough. If you haven't been there yet, I think it's safe to say you'll be impressed. The first time I went, I couldn't believe how magnificent it was, and that's how I got involved, and that's how a lot of people get involved. So it's April 24th at the high school. We've extended it a half an hour to try to give more people time to get through, 6:30 to 8:30, and we'd love to see you all there. And thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night. Item 2B on the agenda is an update on renovations to our Lower Providence Library, and with us this evening is Lynn Burkholder.
Good evening. As you know, we launched a new strategic plan five-year plan in 2014, and one of our goals of that plan was to reconfigure library space to meet community needs. Our building was built in 1996. Our first full year of service, 1997, we saw 89,000, just slightly over 89,000 visitors. In 2014, we had 186,000 visitors. So not only have our numbers increased and changed, also the way our building is being used has changed over the years. And we want to make our building relevant and serve the needs of our community. So we started looking at goals of what we would hope to achieve for a renovation to our current facility. Our goals were determined by the results of our community-wide survey that we gave out in 2013. We had almost 500 responses to that. We also used observation of what we were seeing in the library, how people were using it, what was lacking. We had input from library staff, and we also did some research in current trends in library services. And we came up with 7 goals. So our first goal is a teen space. Our library's young adult teen area is in a corner that sort of flows out of the children's section. There's nothing to distinguish it as being different from the children's section, except that it's even more crowded. There's not enough room for the collection. They're on top of shelves and on book carts. So we wanted a space that was big enough to accommodate their needs, that was defined as a teen area and not the children's area. And one thing that we did learn from our trends in library research and our trends in library services, teens don't want to be part of the kiddie library. They want their own space. So our first goal was to create a teen space. Our second is to create a cyber cafe coffee bar area. This would be an area with tables, chairs, where people could enjoy a snack, either that they bring with us, or we would have with them, or we would have vending machines, coffee vending and such there, where they could sit for a while. Sometimes when people come to the library, they're there for a couple hours or more. Now, this was determined because this actually received the highest response rate on our community survey when we asked the question about use of space and what would entice you to visit the library more often. This got the #1 response. Plus, it's a carryover from our previous 5-year strategic plan from 2008. People then wanted a coffee bar cyber cafe, and we never got it. So we feel like we need to get that accomplished now. The second is, or third rather, is increased space and privacy for computer users. The majority of our public computers are on library tables that were not really designed for computer use. They're scrunched together. There's no room to lay stuff down beside you if you're working with something. And it's also quite easy for the person next to you just to look across and see the private information on your screen. And people have really indicated they would like more room at their computer station. So we will reconfigure our public computer area. We also want to include a couple enclosed small study rooms. This is a feature that a lot of libraries that are renovating, even in Montgomery County that have done recent renovations, have added small rooms, table, a few chairs where you could have a study group, where a tutor and a student could meet. Sometimes we have business professionals that call and ask, do we have a room? They're meeting with a client in our area, and or a counselor who is meeting with her patient. And so this would provide some space for that sort of usage. And then our fifth goal was to centralize our service area. In 2014, we added, for the first time, a reference and information station, staffed full-time with a reference librarian. What we would like to do is to incorporate this into our current circulation area just by reconfiguring the design of the circulation so that so that all the services are centrally located. And we feel this would be more efficient. It puts the reference librarian in close proximity of the circulation desk because she's also the backup person when necessary, and also makes her more visible because people invariably come first to the circulation desk if they have a question. This way, it's a little easier to send people around to the reference desk than to send them over there to the reference desk. Some people get a little annoyed at being sent away, and we think this would be a better configuration for us. We have two more goals. We have a quiet room for reading and study. Now, most people would just assume a library is quiet. But with the large amount of programming, and especially children's programming, plus cell phones that ring all the time and such, our library is not necessarily that quiet. And people do have an expectation to be able to find a quiet place. And that's something that people have asked for a number of times, if there's a quiet place in the library. No, there's not. And then the last was an area for our Friends of the Library book sale. That's currently housed in our children's department, and it's taking up a lot of room right now. But it's an important feature. Our friends raise about $15,000 a year from their used book sales. And those books are donated by people in the community and resold by us. They give all of that money back to the library. It funds the purchase of new materials and other items that we need for the library, so it supports the library. But they don't have any space to put incoming stuff. So when you go in there, you see bags and boxes that people have dropped off. They need a better area, a space of their own for their sale and where they can sort and keep things in order. So to accomplish these goals, we engaged Godshaw Kane O'Rourke Architects to provide a plan for us using our existing space where we could accomplish these goals. As it turns out, alas, our existing space isn't quite big enough because if we put all of these new things in, we have to give up other space to fit all of this. Which is why you see number 6 and 7 are grayed out. We've realized we're going to have to make this into a two-phased plan, which would include a future addition onto the back side of the library. So at this point, we are just presenting phase 1 of our plan, which will cover points 1 through 5. We feel that we can accomplish these 5 goals in our existing space. We can accomplish it in stages if necessary rather than getting it all done at once. So we could have a 1 to 2 year period where we could accomplish these goals. And we also feel that we have adequate funding or can raise any needed additional funding comfortably enough to fund this project. Our architect estimated a cost of about $100,000 for this. We have some unrestricted cash reserves that we can pull on. We just last month in March received an anonymous donation in the amount of over $14,000. So that will be added into the pot. And we can also do some specific fundraising if needed to raise the necessary funds. So our recent amendment to the Library Services Agreement in 2012 states that if we want to undertake any structural or other alterations that would significantly change the design and appearance of our building, we must have written approval from the township supervisors to do that. So that's why we are here tonight. And I have as my guest here our architect, Kevin Godshaw. Kevin, would you like to come on up? Mr. Godshaw was the lead architect or principal project leader when our original building was constructed. So he's well acquainted with our building and with our needs. And he is going to then present his plan. And you push your little button there, and that'll get your next slide.
Before I go through the specific layout, I'll just mention that we've been working with the library board for several months, and we tested a number of options. So as we go through the plan and we see where different areas are moving around, it was tested in several different locations of the library against what could be lost, what could be gained if it was moved there. So this is really the culmination of maybe 4 or 5 different plans that we've looked at during that time frame. The plan on the left is the existing library, and of course you come in through the main doors, the vestibule's here, meeting rooms off to your right, circulation desk, adult library on this side, children's library on that side. As Lynn had mentioned, the renovation that we're talking about is all within the walls of the library. And right up front I want to say that before you start thinking that we're tearing the entire space apart and redoing it, no. This is a very subtle, focused attempt at looking at specific areas, very light impact. You come in the library here, the circulation desk stays where it is. We wound up targeting this area for the cyber cafe to be able to clear out a few stacks that are currently used by the young adult section, making that open area that would have a few tables, some comfortable seating. We would change the flooring in this area so it was a hard floor in case there were any spills. It has that nice corner of glass. It's the kind of place that you want to be in to sit down with a cup of coffee and review materials. The sink and the plumbing can be located right here in the corner, and that's very strategic because there's a sink right inside the meeting room, so I don't have to go trenching across the library looking for a sanitary drain. We can keep it all contained within that corner of the library space. The young adult section that used to be here gets displaced to the other side of the library, and we looked at how the shelves and the collection could be shifted around to accommodate that. As was pointed out before, the young adult section becomes a portion of the adult library rather than on the children's library side, which is a very important consideration. The circulation desk would be reconfigured. Currently, there's a reference library in here. That function would be pulled into the circulation desk. We're talking about keeping the same desk but modifying it so that there's another working station here, and we just reconfigure the entrance into how you get into the interior of it. The one piece of new construction is actually the construction of these 2 study rooms. This is where the computers are placed against that curved wall right now. These would be those quiet rooms that 1, 2, maybe 3 people could gather together to work together, to tutor, to do the types of functions that are in the space right now that generate a little bit of noise. That could actually be put into these 2 private rooms here, and the computers are redistributed around the library. We've expanded the computer area that's currently here to include more spaces. It was partly made possible by the reference librarian moving out. And we've placed several computer stations around the perimeter here. These could be little desks that are right off of the column structure, and they could be walk-up catalog stations. A couple of merchandisers here just to highlight maybe some new materials or things in the book study or the book sale area. And the rest of the library pretty much stays the way that it is. We're not dealing with the lighting. We're not replacing the carpet throughout. We're not adding shelf space. We're just doing these limited things. I'll also point out that these 2 study rooms are pretty specifically placed there because if you know the library design well, this is actually sort of a soffitted lower ceiling area. It's the one place in this library where I can build rooms that I don't have to change lighting systems through the building. I don't have to run walls up 18 or 20 feet in the air. I can just sort of slide them underneath that area that's there now. So it's a very low impact place to add that additional construction. So that's the scope of the renovations. I guess I can turn it back to Lynn, or I can take any questions.
Do you have any questions for either of us?
What is the time frame?
Well, as soon as we get your approval, we can start looking at accomplishing the goals. I figured probably within 1 to 2 years we would have it done, hopefully. if we can get it done in 1 year, that's great, but probably 1 to 2 years. So we would get it accomplished fairly soon. It's not a real long-term project. And a lot of it is moving things around. Like Kevin said, the only construction really is going to be the 2 little meeting rooms, and then there'll have to be a little cabinetry sink area there for the cafe area.
Lynn, I have one question for you. It looks very well thought out and well planned. In the past, we've discussed the township's responsibility with the library, specifically the roof. Have you had any
Problems with the roof?
investigation with the roof, or maybe when it needs to be replaced, so that we can budget appropriately for when that needs to, be addressed?
We are not having any problems with the roof. I haven't looked to see when that, when that might be necessary. I guess that's something we could look.
It's a standing seam metal roof. It
They're
should,
like 90 years or so.
I was going to say
Yeah.
50 at least.
But
Yeah.
I believe that was the one that you had problems with originally when that was installed.
They
I
installed
think-
the snow
It-
brakes wrong.
It was sliding down or something. That was just as I was coming when I started here, the roof repairs were underway, so it was kind of something I just kind of,
There was a problem with installation, and then it was fixed.
Yeah,
years
it's
ago
been
when we pushed it
corrected,
up. It
yeah.
was fixed that year. I remember that year.
There is a section, though, that has shingles, though, isn't there?
I don't think so. I would have to go
That high
look.
section in the middle
Does
has
it?
shingles.
You know,
We'll
You
keep
would
it,
know.
we'll keep it on
I
our,
was going to say it has shingles on it, but I.
but maybe it does. I don't
just-
really know.
We'll have to keep it on our radar. I want to make sure that the township, is able to
Mm.
pay for that when that responsibility comes due.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Have you done construction cost estimates associated with this project?
With this project?
Yes.
We have, Kevin has given us an estimate of 100,000.
Right. That's based on simple dollars per square foot on the renovation areas. And the furniture was taken off by 2 different furniture companies. So where we are adding some additional furniture items, they were actually priced by a supplier.
Okay.
At this point, we haven't designed the actual walls and doors, so it's not a line item takeoff, but dollars per square foot, we think it's a good budget to work to.
Okay. Have you developed a budget associated with that, Lynn, as well? Yeah, budget.
A
so-
budget, no, not yet, other than beyond what Kevin has given us.
Well, we have the proposed rendering, but I think we would need all of that paperwork prior to taking up the approval. So if you could get that to us, we can put that on a future agenda.
Okay. More specific costs associated with the different areas is what you're asking for.
Yeah,
Okay,
the overall project costs and then the breakdown within it.
okay. All right, we'll see what we can get to you then. Okay, any other questions?
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Item 2C on the agenda this evening is a status report on the Ridge Pike Overlay Ordinance, and with us tonight is Meredith Curran from Montgomery County Planning Commission.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you.
I know I've met some of you already, but nice to meet you all. I'm here to give an update on the Ridge Pike West zoning district, the rewrite for this area. When this project started, and I know you have all been a part of this project so far, so I know you've heard a lot about this zoning district over the past year and a half that this has really been moving forward. But the focus of this part is just the western end, from Evansburg State Park to Perkiomen Creek. The goal of this area was to really develop more intensity along Ridge Pike, really concentrated at the intersections, improve the walkability of Ridge Pike, as well as connect the surrounding residential areas to what we hope to be more commercial and mixed use uses along this roadway. The yellow line, sort of going around the outside, the thick yellow line, is the proposed boundaries for this western portion of the zoning district for Ridge Pike. And I know you've heard a lot about it in the past from Sean Metrick when he was here, so I'm not going to go through everything again, but there have been a couple changes that have been proposed in the past 3 months since I've been working here with you to amend what Sean kind of left it off with. And these are change number 1, the elimination as multifamily as a permitted or conditional use. I know that this use kind of has a little bit of history. I think it was permitted, and then it was changed to be permitted only as part of a mixed-use development with retail, and then it was moved to conditional. And then the discussion, just sort of resolved in, the thought of removing it as a use altogether. So these uses here are the uses that are permitted in the proposed district. As you can see, it includes single-family detached and single-family attached dwelling units, but does not include multifamily anymore. So that's one big change that has come since you've last seen this ordinance.
When you say multifamily, do you mean apartments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so attached dwelling units would be your twins and your townhomes, and those are still permitted. The second change is something that came about in a recent Planning Commission meeting and was more initiated by myself and other folk at the Montgomery County Planning Commission. When we thought about taking out the multifamily, which was proposed by the township, we thought about the proposed setback. And the way it's written in this ordinance is a frontage zone, which is intended to keep the buildings closer to the street so you don't have these huge parking lots with the buildings set far back. That kind of detracts from walkability and kind of creating a streetscape and a main street feel like was intended with this district. And the way it was written, a few months ago, you had this frontage zone of 0 to 10 feet where most of the buildings along the frontage had to be located within that zone. So your maximum setback could be 10 feet. And when you have a required 4-foot landscape buffer and a required 6-foot sidewalk, as the ordinance includes, that really meant having the buildings right up to the sidewalk line. And we sort of thought about with the multifamily out of there, you're not going to have maybe quite the local pedestrian, population that you would if that were still there. Additionally, we thought, Ridge Pike is still just a fast-moving roadway. It has has very high traffic volumes. So while we still want to keep the feel, we don't necessarily want to encourage the giant setbacks with the huge parking lots in front. Increasing that frontage zone from 10 feet to 25 feet would allow maybe adding more landscaping and other amenities in front of these stores, as well as mimic more of the more rural, less kind of high density feel that you have in this part of Ridge Pike. So that was the thought behind that change, and so we've increased it in the ordinance from 0 to 10 feet as your zone to 0 to 25 feet as your zone, so a little bit more flexibility. And those are really the changes, and nothing else besides those two things have changed since you've last seen it, which I believe was at the end of 2014 when Sean Metrick was here presenting it. I don't know if you have any additional questions. No? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your work, Meredith. Moving on to new business, item 3A on the agenda this evening, discussion and consideration of appointment of Patricia Alzamora as alternate to the zoning hearing board. The zoning hearing board is in need of 2 alternates. Patricia has indicated her interest. We have her bio information. She's in the audience this evening, and I would look for a motion to appoint her.
Make a motion to appoint
Thank you.
Patricia Alzamora as an alternate to the zoning hearing board.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Patricia, thank you for agreeing to serve. And I believe Denise is Denise with us tonight? She's in the back? If you just follow Denise, she will swear you in. Thank you very much. Item 3B under new business, discussion and consideration of financing for dump truck and chipper. Jerry Golis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the March 19th Board of Supervisors meeting, the board authorized staff to proceed with securing financing proposals for 2 pieces of equipment, a dump truck and a wood chipper. We proceeded to reach out to 5 different institutions: Delaware Valley Regional Financing Authority, First Niagara Bank, Quakertown National Bank, TD Bank, and Univest. Out of those 5 that we solicited, 4 responded. Quakertown did not. As you'll see in the memo in your packet, Delaware Valley, not surprisingly, returned the most reasonable, well, actually the lowest interest rate for a 10-year term at 1.73%. Doing an apples-to-apples comparison in that grid, the next lowest interest rate was from TD Equipment Finance at 2.6% interest, and then First Niagara at 2.99, and Univest at 3.4. Fairly straightforward, but as such, I'm requesting that the board authorize staff to proceed with executing the documents with Delaware Valley Regional Financing Authority to lease and then ultimately purchase these 2 pieces of equipment.
Thank you very much. Again, great job with soliciting the proposals. The interest rate at 1.73% is quite impressive, and that ends up being interest payments of just a little over $13,000 over the course of the loan, so that's quite impressive. Any comments?
I have a question for you, Jerry. I'm sort of like a broken record. Every time you bring up talking about financing, I ask you the same question. One, is this equipment allowed if we were to have a PIB loan from the state? And did you look at the rate for that if you can purchase it under the PIB loan?
My understanding, and I always hesitate to quote without looking at the document, but when we looked at equipment in the past, I believe the PIB alone only allows you to finance 50% of equipment, 100% of road projects, but 50% of the equipment.
Okay.
The interest rate, the last time we looked at the PIB, and it hasn't, since prime hasn't changed, it would be 1/2 of prime, which is that still 3.25%, I believe. So that interest rate for a PIB loan would be slightly less, but I don't believe, and I will get back to you for certain, I don't think that we would be able to finance the full amount of the equipment.
Okay, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
I just thought, the last time I saw it, I thought it was 1.5%, but don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. So, okay.
As could I.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the financing for the dump truck and the chipper with Delaware Valley Regional Finance Authority at the rate of 1.73% over a 10-year term?
I would make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Item 3C on the agenda, authorization to advertise recreational overlay ordinance. John Rice.
The board has a proposed zoning amendment which would permit a new use within the overlay zone in the R1 and the R2 zoning districts. As the board knows, this was discussed at the recent Planning Commission meeting. Planning Commission had some, I think, some concerns about impacts. There is not a specific proposal that is in front of the township. The use itself would permit outdoor or indoor recreational uses. It would be restricted to township, nonprofit, or other governmental agencies in terms of uses. Provides for dimensional criteria, provides for hours of operation, provides for lighting criteria. The county Planning Commission reviewed this, and you have in your binder a March 23rd, 2015 review letter from the county. So it's on the agenda tonight for possible advertisement. I know there's been a lot of questions about this zoning ordinance in terms of where it would apply. Right now, the way it's written, it would be permitted in both the R1 and the R2 zoning district. There is no reason why the board couldn't eliminate at least the R1 zoning district as a potential location for one of these uses. So that's my first just comment in terms of moving forward with this. That would limit certainly the number of properties where this use could be established if you eliminated the R1 district, which is your less dense zoning district in this township. There's been some other questions about some of the dimensional criteria, and there was a couple issues that were raised to me yesterday regarding the possibility that this might be at one of the schools. And Mr. Sorgini asked me to look into that, and I'm not sure where that information was generated, but that's just misinformation. That's not true. And I think what I heard was that the YMCA would be interested in one of those schools. That's also not true. That's misinformation. I spoke to their attorney today. They have no interest in that site. It's too small. They need in excess of, I think, 20 acres. I think that's about, and I'm not that familiar with the school or the property, but I think it's about 13 or 14 acres. So,
14.
manager has corrected me. It's 14 acres. So, you know, I don't know whether there's questions about that, but I'm just putting that out there. There's nothing going on with that school or with the school district regarding this use. We do know there's some property owners that have expressed an interest of larger tracts of ground to develop this type of use. That's something that I don't intend to comment on. I think until there's an agreement of sale or something between a buyer and a seller, I don't think it's appropriate for us to debate it or speculate regarding that. So that's the issue with the school. There's nothing going on unless somebody is going to stand up and tell me something that there is, you know, I tracked that down. I think it's misinformation. This use, assuming this would go forward, be advertised and be adopted, or, you know, the Planning Commission I know had some additional issues. Ultimately, anybody that would want to establish this use would have to file a land development plan, which means they would have to go through the Planning Commission, both Planning Commissions, and be subject to all the usual and customary land development requirements, such as stormwater management, traffic impact studies, etc. So right now, just what's in front of the board is, it's on here. The board wants to move forward with this. It would need to authorize me to advertise this for one of its meetings in the near future. Unless the board has any other questions about the ordinance, I don't have really any other comments. You know, it was discussed in some detail, I think, at the Planning Commission meeting at their last session. And I think Mr. Mrozinski's emails sort of, or his memo spells out, you know, what the consensus was at that meeting.
Okay, thank you, John. Comments from the board? Okay. John, removing R1 from the ordinance, what does that effectively do? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, it eliminates this use as a permitted use. It would reduce the number of parcels where this use could be established going forward. We would have to make some revisions to the ordinance. If the board wants to do that, you could certainly direct that be done tonight. It would go back to the Planning Commission. I would recommend it go back to both Planning Commissions. Anytime you make that kind of a change in an ordinance that's been reviewed by the local or the county Planning Commission, they need to get another look at it and comment on it. And I know that your Planning Commission had some other concerns. I don't think there were any specific recommendations that they had, but they had some concerns about the impacts which would be, you know, expected with this type of a use.
John, well, all of those impacts would be addressed in the land development phase of any proposal, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So if there was a proposal for a spot of land and people were concerned about traffic, that would be fully addressed, and shrubbing and lighting and all that during the land development phase.
There would have to be a plan, an engineered plan spelling out, the uses, the size of a facility, if it was an indoor facility, comply with parking criteria, comply with impervious surface, and do stormwater management. Water and sewer, I assume, would be available to the site. And, I mean, most sites, I would think, in the township.
Well, and our regular public facilities overlay requires that it be, any facility on the PFO be hooked up to township water and sewer.
Right. So, yeah, the lighting, I know lighting was an issue with the planning commission. There's some fairly extensive lighting provisions in here that are part of the ordinance, which are actually from a model ordinance for sports field lighting that I don't think the township has currently on the book. So all those issues would be addressed. There'd be a land development plan, and that would have to be approved by this board and recommended by both planning commissions.
John, I had two other things that are sort of a glaring change for me. The maximum impervious coverage would be reduced. I believe currently it's 50%. And in this draft ordinance that we have in front of us, it's 35%.
For this.
Is that right?
For this use.
For that
Correct.
use. And then, of course, the minimum lot area of the 10 acres. I mean, I think what I gathered from the Planning Commission was they needed to look further as to what parcels were truly affected and would fall under this criteria. So, I don't know. For me, it seems like the Planning Commission didn't have enough information to do their, fully vet what we were showing them.
Yeah, I think we had some information from the county on eligible parcels. And maybe we need some more information. But when you're dealing with, this type of a use, you may have a parcel that meets the minimum acreage of 10 acres, or if it's 15 or 20, but you can really drill down and do a site analysis. And, some may not qualify because of access to roads. Some may not qualify because of natural resources. There might be steep slopes. It would be difficult to analyze all the possible parcels at that level, but I think the county did provide some information on parcel size.
Yes, they did. Actually, the information that the county provided at the meeting, I subsequently was able to look through and determine that it was not determinative. It was an error, some of it. Since then, we've asked the county, what the county was doing, they were looking at the PFO, irrespective of the R2 or the R1, and we said, no, if we're amending the PFO, it would apply to the R1 and the R2. Because if you look at the definitions under the R1 and the R2, it allows for any of the uses that are allowed for under the PFO. That's your public facilities overlay district. So I did have the county redo their figures for tonight, and I asked them just to do it for the R2 district, because we're talking about eliminating the R1 district. And for those, and I asked them to break it out into two separate analyses. Said, do it for 10 acres. There are 31 properties in the R2 district that are 10 acres, qualify at 10 acres. I said, then look at it for 15 acres as well. When you look at it for 15, there are 21 properties. We'll give all this information to the Planning Commission as well.
I guess I have two questions. Anytime there's a subdivision and land development plan that's put forward, traffic impact is part of that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, so even if an overlay is placed over this, we talk a lot about infrastructure and traffic here in the township, and have really, our efforts have really been geared to making sure that any development also includes relevant infrastructure improvements. So any development under this would have to go through that as well. The other question in looking at this and digesting it and considering issues here in this township and in other local areas, lighting often tends to be one of the biggest issues when you talk about putting in recreational development. Could lighting be removed as a by right and permitted as a conditional use?
I guess theoretically you could do that, but, I mean, the use is the use. I mean, that's more of a performance standard. If you want to have, I think, maybe some more control over lighting, we can reword the lighting provision in here to provide for that. And it's got to be, I mean, it may just be there's got to be some additional restrictions on lighting and in terms of lighting leaving the property, which aren't in here. But I'm not sure I'd recommend that you carve that out of the use as a separate conditional use hearing.
Okay.
I mean, you could certainly make the whole use a conditional use. I mean, that would make more sense if you want that kind of additional scrutiny.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? What's the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion that we table this item, send it back to the planning commission so that they fully can vet it with the information that we're uncovering and work on it a little more. I don't think it's a product ready for us to begin to even consider for advertising.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Additional questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, before we vote on that, I disagree with that, and I know once the vote's cast on that, we're stuck. So, no, I think we ought to go ahead and move forward with advertising the overlay ordinance.
Can't hear you, Mr. Thomas.
Sorry. Just wanted to get it out that before we actually vote on it and the ship has sailed, that I think we ought to go ahead and advertise this overlay ordinance. And I just want to get that out there before we vote.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from the public? Line up, if you would, please, and when you come up, please state your name for the record, and we'll need you to speak into the mic, please.
Thank you. My name is Preston Lutweiler, 752 Mockingbird Lane. I was at the Planning Commission. I heard a lot of concerns about traffic and lighting and noise and, where whatever is being proposed here could go. And I also, I myself and one other commenter suggested that this not be a by right approval, but rather conditional use. Once you make this by right, any property that meets these criteria, whatever acreage you choose, and meets the lighting criteria and the other criteria that you establish in this ordinance, by right can do what they want to do on that property, and you have very little leverage to negotiate in the land development process something that the neighbors and everybody else might be willing to live with. So I don't understand why you would be making this by right for potentially 31 properties in the township. Now, originally, the presentation was it could apply to 57 parcels. That included R1 and R2. It included some pieces in Evansburg, and the Planning Commission, I know, was tasked with going back and trying to get you an accurate count. But I think people, were curious. It's not unexpected that wild speculation, given what is going on in the school district about Audubon School, that wild speculation would be started when something like this is being proposed at the township. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I would just reiterate that that question has now been answered, and that the school board and the board of supervisors remain two autonomous boards and municipal organizations. Please come forward. Thank you.
I'm Kathy Eske, 540 Highgate Road, and I have a few questions. One of them is, why are we doing this? Another one, is there a need to do this? Another one is, has there been a request to do this? And if none of those questions can be answered, then why, again, I ask, why are we doing this? Because if someone wants to do something with a property that is not zoned for what they want, they can always come to the zoning hearing board and make a request for whatever it is that they want to do, as long as it meets the requirements of the zoning hearing board. And last week, there were 57 parcels that the county thought we had. Now, Mr. Gastridge, if I listened to you correctly, we now have 52.
No.
What?
31 in the R2.
If you make the change, but we don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah, and the 57 that the county listed last at the planning commission meeting included parcels that were in the state park.
I realize that. I realize that she did every possible thing that could be done, and she did state that some of it was not suitable for recreation. But once this ordinance would be passed, we could have whatever, playgrounds, ball fields, the Y, any other recreational thing that might want to come into the township. And to say that we have to go through land development and controls, once the ordinance is approved, the controls are limited. And too many controls placed on a parcel, I believe the township will then be opening themselves up with the developers to file a lawsuit, because you've asked them to come to town to play, and now you're telling them they can't play the way they want to. So the restrictions for the lights, the fence, the parking, hours of operation will not suit their plans, then waivers will have to be granted, or there again, there's the threat of a lawsuit. And we know how people react when there's a threat of a lawsuit. I think at this point, we're giving away the store. The parcels have not been identified because there's no potential client customer at the moment that's willing to be revealed. I understand that. I recommend that you do not go forward with this ordinance in any fashion because it's detrimental to the township. I think you're putting the cart before the horse. When we have a request, then it's time to act on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments?
My name's Walt Jadwabney, 4016 Yerkes Road. I just think it's awful convenient that with this whole Methacton school thing going on, trying to close these schools, and then everybody throwing their own words down their throat, all of a sudden this comes up. Why do we need to get rid of all our open land and build buildings? Why do you have to get rid of Evansburg Park? There's no need for it. You already have all these vacant buildings that people can buy and use. Why do we need to get rid of all our open land and build more crap that no one's going to use? Or no one's taking consideration that the houses nearby, with all the noise, if you zone it the way that gentleman said, they can do what they want. They can make all kinds of noise, all kinds of time in the night. People have kids that have to go to bed and get up for school. Why are you going to interfere with that? You don't need to sell this land off or have people come in. Leave it as the land. You don't need to get rid of it. Thanks. And there was offers from the Y, by the way, because that all got brought up on the school board crap, trying to close the school.
Where's that coming from, sir? We contacted their lawyer directly.
Do you think they're going to admit to it because of all the stuff that went on with the school district?
This isn't the school district. This is the township.
Yeah, but there's people on each other's boards. If you check on who's on what board, You don't need that Audubon school just happens to be in a zone that you want to change. Real convenient, isn't it?
Give us the information about the offers, we'll follow up on it, but I'm telling you, it's misinformation.
And that's what they kept saying about the school board issue with the school.
I'm just addressing the why or something's going at the Audubon school. It's not correct. You shouldn't repeat it over and over again. It is not correct.
Right, but you don't need to sell the land off. Why is there such a big rush all of a sudden now to rezone these particular zones? You don't need to rezone them. Leave it as open land the way it is. Because you're not considering the homeowners and the kids in that area if you put a recreational center in there.
Sir, part of the purpose of it is to keep open space. It's
Not
to
if you
allow-
let people like
Sir,
the YMCA come in.
Sir, it's not geared towards the YMCA. It's geared to keeping some of our open space that is in R2 district and having them turned into
But
parks.
the way it is now, that's not an issue. It still keeps as open land. You don't need to rezone it.
Some of it is not our land. Some of it is land that's being offered to be made into public parks at the expense of private property owners. That is the purpose of the ordinance.
Yeah, that's the purpose, but as everybody knows, that some company can come in there
No.
because
See,
the way
that's-
it's zoned, the way you're going to zone
No,
it.
the ordinance specifically doesn't allow companies. It only allows government, township, and nonprofits. No businesses. You will not have any businesses utilizing this ordinance.
Then if that's the case, and only people like the Y are public parks, why do you need to redo it? Just leave it the way it is.
Because then you're not able to do it that way.
You don't need to rezone it.
Because that use is not permitted. The purpose of the proposed ordinance is to allow private land to be maintained as private land, but open for the public use as parks. It's a
Which
good thing
allows
for
you
the
to build,
township.
put lights up and buildings and everything else.
It allows you to build a park.
But it's zoned right now for houses. That's how it's zoned.
So it's taking
The
land that would be
warehouses.
potentially those private property owners could sell to a developer and put houses or townhouses or other kinds of, residential structures, and it keeps them open as parks. Open space for the public to enjoy.
How would it be an open park if you build townhouses?
That's what we're trying to avoid.
That's not the way it seems. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Joe Ferrero, 12 Pine Tree Drive. Am I to understand that as we are changing the zoning from R1, which is less dense, and removing it from the advertisement here, that's what you're saying, you want to remove R1 from there where it's less dense. Are we steering development into more dense areas? And we have a problem here in the township as far as ratables. We can't get businesses in here. Now we're restricting people even further when you take off the R1 as a possibility for, you're saying it's parkland. That's what we're going to do this for? We're going to have R1 parks? Is that where we're going here?
R2
R2 parks, but when you take R1, you're taking R1 off the table, which is even less dense, which is a better candidate to have parkland on it.
I agree with you, Mr. Farrar.
Okay, so I think we're limiting ourselves. Part of what people are talking about is flexibility. Flexibility on your part to be able to say, oh, conditional use, and let's not have this by right, whatever. But when you almost immediately take R1 off the table, you're eliminating a good chunk of your land stock there. That was my first point. My second point is, how many of these properties are owned by the Methacton School District that we're talking about? You have all these figures on the Heinz 57 and the 31 magical ones. How many are Methacton lots?
The county's given us the properties that meet the minimum lot size.
Okay, how many of those are Methacton?
I mean, I don't know unless Mr. Gestrick or the county planner is here. I mean, how many do you think they are? Half a dozen?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking a question. I ask questions that I don't know the answers to. So I don't know how many are
Mr. Guy, I think it would probably
Methacton.
be all 5 of their schools in Lower
All
Providence.
5 of their schools would be involved.
No, not be involved. I mean, they would fit into that overlay, as would 28, 29 other properties.
Okay. The other thing is a nonprofit. The difference between a regular business and a nonprofit, you guys are lawyers, Ms. Zimmerman and Mr. Duffy, you guys are lawyers. Can you explain the difference between a nonprofit and a regular profit business to the public?
I can't. I'm not a tax lawyer.
Maybe Mr. Rice could answer that question.
Can you
since
answer
he's
that
on the
right?
council.
Different, because my understanding of a nonprofit is it's still a business. It's just turning the profits back into the company.
That's basically what it is. They have to be qualified under the IRS. I'm not a tax lawyer either, but there's different types of nonprofits. There's 501c3s, there's 501c4s. So they have to meet that qualification.
Right, so it can still be a business. It's just the type of business that it is.
Correct.
It's not just the
Correct.
holy shroud of government and park industry. It can be any kind of industry that
Sure.
qualifies as this tax write-off type of thing.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
And the recreational,
What's that?
and the recreational facility,
And recreational facility that is a business.
and 10 acres, and nonprofit or government. I mean, there's a
Okay,
criteria.
so we're dialing up the Audubon School, it looks like.
No.
No,
No? Okay.
that's misinformation.
What is that based on?
Well, it's based on the school district coming up with 7 off-the-wall plans to close schools, and then coming back and arriving, oh, we can close the Audubon School. So you don't have to be a mathematician to put 2 and 2 together to say, hey, we're doing all the zoning stuff, we're greasing the skids, and you know, if you're going to grease the skids too much, and you bring the jackhammers into the school, you're going to hurt one of the second graders with falling drywall.
Two different entities here.
Okay, well, I don't believe that.
Well,
It's a
It is.
coordinated process.
no.
Well, I don't believe that, but
You're wrong.
you well, okay, I'm wrong. You can say I'm wrong. I'm seeing a
just telling you,
coordinated
that's what
process
the
here.
facts are, there's no coordination.
Okay.
This is a couple private landowners have inquired about this use. That's it.
Well, instead of changing the laws, let these landowners come forward first, and then you go about doing it. Do it the right way. Don't do it like this. This just seems like a backroom deal when you're doing it like this.
We're out here in the sunshine. There's
Well, who are the people who are saying that they want these changes to the laws?
These are property owners that.
Who are the property owners?
I'm not going to discuss the property owners.
Well, that's my point. You're not doing it in sunshine. Thank you very much.
Any additional comments?
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Latour, 138 Level Road. It's just a question for clarification. Misinformation does fly around. I thought that I read somewhere that this was for outdoor or indoor recreational facilities. And my understanding with the comments that you just made were that this was intended for outdoor and to keep public open space. And that's not what I thought I read, so I was just hoping maybe you guys could clarify that a little bit for us.
Both.
Okay, so what you said also was intended to mean indoor recreational facilities.
No, I mean, the offer that I'm aware of, the private property owner that's come before us,
But the,
has talked about taking their land and making an open outdoor park. The ordinance would allow for several
Right.
uses such that, you know, you have to make it broad enough that you're not limiting the recreational activity that somebody would want
okay,
to
so
make.
the ordinance would allow for either indoor or outdoor, whatever is
That's correct.
potentially in the works was specific to outdoor, but that's not where this would stop. Right. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Mr. Borai?
Hi, Deb. I want to congratulate Colleen and Jill for putting a motion on the floor to table this until you get it right. I mean, everything that Mr. Rice put out there of all the changes, how can you advertise something with all the changes? The other thing I'd like to ask is, I was at the Planning Commission meeting on the 25th, which was about 6 days ago, and something was brought up about Park Avenue to Trooper Road, YMCA, which is a nonprofit organization. Now, that sits on 25 acres. And my question is, the front end is a landscaper, the back end is a soil-rich company. If they came in, would your ordinance change the whole 25 acres or just 10 acres of it? Mr. Price? Rice? Why do you keep calling you Price? I'm sorry.
I don't
Mr.
know.
Rice, I'm sorry.
I don't know. It's a very short name.
Price and Waterhouse, that's what it is.
RICE. All of it would be eligible because all of it's in the zoning district.
All right, so you'd go
Minimum
for
lot,
10 acres or more.
Yeah,
You'd go
10
for the
acres
whole-
or more.
10 acres or more?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional comments?
Christina O'Donnell, Stoughton Road. I was also at the Planning Commission meeting, and I do have a few things that I think maybe could be cleared up. I know the Audubon School keeps getting raised, and I think that is because this overlay would affect that parcel, and should that school get closed and somebody chooses to put one of these recreation outdoor facilities there, then they so could do that.
Right, if it met the minimum.
So I think that's where this is coming from, that it is possible that it's not what you're aware of at this time, but it's something that could happen and seems likely from the ongoings within the township.
But Ms. O'Donnell, if Methacton ends up closing that school, I have no idea what their plans are. They could sell it to somebody, but something's
quite all
going to
right.
have to happen with that property at some point if they close the school.
I'm just clarifying, you were asking where this came from, and I'm explaining where I think it came from, and I'm also explaining that it's potential that that could be used for one of these facilities. Also, my notes are going to be out of order because I really didn't think I was going to speak today. You had mentioned, Mr. Duffy, that you were looking for more outdoor space, and the people you were aware of wanted to have open space and a nice park and a nice setting. If that's what we want to do, is to have more township park, which I believe all of ours are dusk to dawn, then why does this have hours of operation from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m.?
Because it would encompass any use in the,
Then maybe we don't need any use.
because we can't tailor an ordinance just to one property.
Well, I'm not tailoring anything. I'm asking questions as to why, if we're looking for...
You're implicating.
Can I
that we
please
should-
finish?
You're implicating.
I
that we
am not
should tailor
implicating anything.
The
And
ordinance
you've
to
been
one
disrespectful
specific use,
before,
and we can't
and you
do that.
continue to be disrespectful.
I have not been disrespectful at all, ma'am.
Talking over me is disrespectful, I'll let you know. So, again, my question is dusk to dawn versus 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. with lights. There's no consideration of the 31, 21, 57 parcels with any studies as to which roads can handle the traffic. I know that there will be a traffic study. All this comes after the fact. All this comes changes to the neighbors. I think it's something that needs to be addressed now. There's 6 acres behind my home that butts up to several more acres and several more acres. So if someone was to acquire that, we now have 32 parcels, and there's other parcels that can be put together. So we're not talking 21, we're not talking 31. We don't really know what we're talking about. And to make a broad statement and to put this together that affects all these parcels or potential parcels is a very big liability for the residents. You mentioned that we would be acquiring, as in the township. I don't know if you can elaborate on that as to what we would be getting,
I mean,
as in parks.
am I allowed to talk now?
That's very rude and condescending. And since I asked you a
I'm
question,
just asking if you were
but
done.
now you're talking over me after you asked me a question. So, yes, I had asked you a question. So in normal conversation, a respectful conversation, now would be appropriate for you to answer.
Okay. The township would not be acquiring anything in terms of gaining title to anything. the township would be having facilities for their residents to utilize in their recreation. So their kids have places to play, safe places to play, people to go and walk around the area with other friends and neighbors, places to have cookouts, places to go swimming, places for all kinds of different types of recreational activity. It's an asset to the township. It's an asset to the community. It's an asset to the residents to have places that they can go and that they can enjoy the outdoors. That is an asset to the community in terms of if you're looking at some point to sell your house or downsize or you get out of town or something like that. It's an attraction for other people to want to come in and buy your house.
Not if it's next to your house. Thank you for all that information. You went on so long, I forgot my next comment, but that might have been what you were intending. One of the things I think needs to be considered is you're telling us that this is for our community, and we are getting this. We are getting a business that's going to be run like a business, even though it's not profit. So although the why is not what we understand is generating this ordinance, this is written so that what was approached before us is that the Y can be put into any of these places, a facility such as the Y. So although it's not it yet, and it's not necessarily Audubon, it does fit all of these criteria. And I think that's what your residents need to know, is not how nice it is that there are restrictions such as hours, 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., and that it's outdoor as well as indoor. You need to get all this out to everybody, because although it is a great feature and a great selling point for our township, it doesn't belong in the middle of a neighborhood. And I think a couple people else have asked, what are you going to advertise tonight should the three who haven't mentioned anything go forward to advertise?
Christina, we already took a vote that we're going to send it back to you and the planning.
It was a motion and a second.
Well, you're going to have your time to vet it properly, gut it, do what you and the planning commission want to do with it. So I think we're just wasting a lot of time here discussing something that we're not going to move this any further. We've already said that.
While we're on that subject of the motion, I'll withdraw my comment from earlier and support you.
Thank you, Don.
And although you might think this is a waste of time, unfortunately, the planning commission meetings are not advertised, and the minutes come out about a month after the fact, so a lot of people don't know what's going on.
Of course
So this,
they're advertised. They're public
How
meetings.
are they not advertised?
I mean, like on TV. Yeah, I know the meetings are advertised.
Okay,
Yeah.
rebroadcast.
Right, rebroadcast,
Okay.
right, so people who don't attend can see, yes, they are definitely advertised. It's the fourth Wednesday of every month. So anyway, that's pretty much a summary of what I wanted to say as a resident, not as somebody on the planning commission. So I know that two of you are moving forward with tabling this and bringing it back to the planning commission, but there's a lot more things that need to be considered than just what's written in this ordinance.
Thank you. Mr. Comro?
Mike Comro, 205 Pinetown Road, Audubon. First, I got to say, I don't know a thing about Audubon School. But I just have a question, Ms. Sogini, I'm directing it towards you. Has the Board of Supervisors read our minutes from our last meeting? Do you have our minutes, and have you read them?
We don't get them till they're approved.
Right.
I could not hear you.
I'm sorry, Mike. We don't get them till they're approved by the planning commission. But we have.
No, how can we approve our own minutes?
No, when you make a motion at the meeting to
We
approve
had a meeting, and we submitted minutes. And you had not had a chance to read our minutes yet?
No, but we're aware of the comments that were made there.
Oh, okay, because like I said, Mr. Duffy was there, he's aware of it. And all I have to say is, with our concerns, as I said, and if I had not said it before, I am a township planner, and with our concerns, this ordinance is just not ready for prime time.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay. There is a motion and a second to table the resolution or the ordinance and to return it to the Planning Commission. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Moving on, item 3C on the agenda, item 3D on the agenda, authorization to advertise electronic sign ordinance. Mr. Rice.
Okay. This is another ordinance which has been through the planning review process. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about this ordinance also. It would permit essentially electronic sign ordinances in the public facility overlay district for school district or township municipal facilities. This has been to the Planning Commission, our Township Planning Commission twice. I think the county has reviewed it twice. The county's most recent review had, I think, 2 comments from their March 20th, 2015 review regarding brightness limitations, and there was a question regarding the content that would be permitted on the sign. There are similarly dimensional criteria regarding this, and I'll say for the public, some of you have been at the Planning Commission meetings and have heard me say this. This was initiated last summer by the school district. The school district was involved in this ordinance. They made the request. When the request came in to the township, I asked the question about this sign out on the road. And there were the 2 reasons why this proceeded the way it did, but this was a proposal that initially came in from the school district solicitor. Actually, I think it was last August.
Last June.
Last June. There are minutes, school district solicitor, staff solicitor meeting minutes that are meetings that are held here where people come in and propose things. There's meeting minutes, they're available. I know that was early, about this time last year when that first happened. So that's the origination of this. It was to permit the school district to be able to utilize this ordinance and to legitimize and bring that sign into compliance at the township building. We have had the traffic engineer review this. Ultimately, any sign would have to be comply with whatever McMahon and Associates would recommend for it in terms of traffic safety. So that's my summary. I don't know if the board has other questions about this. This has been, like I said, in front of the local township planning commission twice at this point.
Comments or questions from the board?
I have one question for you, John. I'm trying to flip through. So the County Planning Commission made a comment in their review that potentially other institutional uses that are currently are in the PFO could ask to have digital signs in addition to the township or the school district.
Correct.
What do you think about that? Yes, that can happen?
Well, they can ask. You would have to amend the ordinance. You would have to amend
Well,
this.
there are. I'm sorry, Patrick. Patrick said there aren't any,
But they would have any other institutional use, church use. I mean, we talked about, making this broader at some point, but you would have to amend this ordinance because this has, the 2 public entities, the school district and the township, get the benefit of this. Could a property owner say, that's not fair, I want one too? Yes. Then you would get a request to add them or amend this ordinance to permit them to do the same thing.
okay. Where they could go for variance.
Or they could go to the zoning hearing board. You currently permit in the RPBD, the GC, and the HC electronic message boards. So it's not as if they're not out there. There isn't a whole lot of, there aren't a whole lot of standards for those. I mean, this amendment would incorporate these standards into those districts also. That was one of the things that we also, once we started looking at this, that in those commercial districts for signs, they would have to meet the same criteria that would be required of the school district in the township. So, and that was sort of a cleanup issue. Planning Commission might want to address that separate and apart from this for the school district and the township, because there's very few standards for those zoning districts for these types of signs.
From my standpoint, we already have zoning districts in which this is permitted. We also have processes by which to go through if somebody were to want to put one where it's not permitted by right. To include the school district in this, I think, is an overreach, and I'm certainly not in favor of it. Any additional questions or comments from the board?
And what was the Planning Commission's recommendation then on this text amendment?
They voted it down 5-3.
5-3 to not recommend, right?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I guess part of the hangup is because most of the PFOs are in a residential overlay, so their underlying zoning is residential. So you'd be putting digital signs essentially in residential areas. I mean, I understand the need and the you know, the importance of digital signs. I'm just not a big fan of seeing them throughout the township. I mean, we have them along our business corridors in certain limitations. Other townships have them all different colors, all different sizes. So I certainly think we need to work on those. Yeah, I think we were doing that in the cleanup ordinance, weren't we?
Yes.
Because that's come up before.
Correct.
But that certainly is a separate subject. But I'm kind of with Jason that I'm not real enthusiastic about putting digital signs on township properties or school district properties at this point.
Is there then a motion to advertise the electronic sign ordinance? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 3E on the agenda, discussion and consideration of preliminary final plan approval for Tier Point Minor Land Development 1000 Adams Avenue, LD 15-01. Mike Mrzinski?
Thank you. The applicant is an existing business down at 1000 Adams Avenue. They had previously been known as Xan. They were bought out by another larger company, Tier Point. They are in the process of expanding, but in a parallel fashion. They're before us tonight to propose the construction of a 3,200 square foot storage building on the edge of their parking lot in the center of their property. This is not part of the phase development in its previously approved set. It's actually a new plan to kind of get some time until the further project can proceed with the new ownership. On their behalf, Matt Surchek from Lamb Engineering is here to answer your questions.
Hello, I'm Matt Sturchak, 939 Jefferson Avenue, Norristown. I'm from Robert E. Lamb Incorporated on behalf of Tier Point. Tier Point would like to build a storage facility located on the side yard at the rear of their parking area. This facility is located at Park Point Business Center, which is located off of Trooper Road by the 422 entrance. This is on the other side of Trooper Road of Park Point, between Adams Avenue, which is the address, and Rittenhouse, The storage facility will be used only for equipment and miscellaneous items. There will be a concrete pad located in front of the facility with an overhead door and a single door next to it, a man door to walk in. And there will be a man door on the rear side as well. Both doors will be lighted. So a light will be over the overhead door here and over the man door in the back. The concrete pad in front will be used primarily for fork trucks to get in and out of the storage facility. And there will be striping here, removing 3 spaces, although the facility has adequate parking for the building. And then for protection of the building, there is going to be placement of jersey barriers or a concrete barrier so no one can park or accidentally go into the storage building. Stormwater, because of its current state, is stone, so the coverage is impervious. Therefore, no major stormwater development had to be done because we're simply adding impervious. So the net impervious did not change. The stormwater will collect into downspouts in the corners, go underground, and then be piped with riprap simply to dissipate the energy of the water. This water will then flow over their existing area, not directly going onto the neighboring property. We submitted this to the county and the township engineer and zoning officer. They've recommended approval. We were in front of the planning commission last Wednesday, and they recommend approval. We did submit for some waivers and deferrals, and I would like to go over them individually for you. On the resolution, the first waiver is to review as a minor land development. The second waiver is for review as a concurrent preliminary final plan. The third waiver is for installing storm sewers and curbs along Rittenhouse Road. The fourth waiver is, I apologize, the next one is a deferral of erosion and sediment control plan, landscaping plan, and replacement trees until December 31st, 2016. The comment in the resolution continues and says, and Adams Avenue sidewalk construction prior to December 31st, 2016.
That's Rittenhouse Road, though, right? Not Adams Avenue, the deferral there.
Based on this resolution of the draft?
It's a typo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Okay.
It should be Rittenhouse, correct? Yeah,
Yes.
I have what you sent to Mike today.
Okay.
And Mike sent me the comment that deferral wasn't for the Adams Avenue sidewalks in, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The deferral is for the Rittenhouse Road sidewalk.
Correct.
Which is already escrowed, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's not a waiver, it's just a deferral under the original approval.
Correct.
Okay.
John, I think the original approval waived the requirements of curbing and sidewalks on Rittenhouse Road because there are none and there's the drainage ditch. This was the discussion we had at the planning committee.
There's actually 2 pieces of the ordinance. One states for curbing and storm sewers, so we're asking for a waiver against that.
Right.
And the other one was a deferral for the sidewalk along Rittenhouse.
Right.
I
Until
thought
2016.
I thought from the planning commission, the deferral was of the sidewalk along Adams Avenue because you didn't want to have to keep digging it up as you did more work.
Adams Avenue sidewalk has already been completed.
Yeah, that's why when we put this resolution, it wasn't clear to me from the review letters which sidewalk we were talking about, but that was your comment to the resolution today. Adams Avenue sidewalks in.
Yes.
Okay, so you want to defer the E&S plan, the landscape, the replacement trees.
That's the issue that you were explaining. We don't want to tear up the trees if they're going to continue construction of a second phase. So that's why we were deferring the landscaping plan in that piece of the ordinance till 2016,
Right.
December 31st of 2016.
Correct, and my understanding is that the plan never calls for sidewalks along Rittenhouse, though.
It does.
The- in-
It's escrowed, right?
Yes.
Tim?
It's escrow.
There's an escrow amount for,
While they might have been escrowed, they were never to be built. That was part of the original waiver.
Yeah, I think the original land development approval did call for sidewalk along Rittenhouse, but it was deferred until some date certain, 2015 or 16, I believe. I guess as I view this application for this storage building, I was viewing this separately and as a distinct application, separate than what we had originally received as this land development application for the 3 building additions that were part of the main function of the business. I think this storage building maybe can be viewed as an individual application and as an interim step to that final plan for the final development of the larger site. So I think the deferrals that we're speaking about are in order. This is a very de minimis application. Mike and I walked the site pretty thoroughly, and I guess in our opinion, we don't see any adverse impacts on the community in allowing, to your point, to install this storage shed today, and then deal with the balance of those improvements and the larger land development questions at a time certain in the future.
And Tim, those deferrals were deferred from the original land development approval.
That is correct.
So we're just continuing that.
That's correct.
And they came up because they filed this separate plan, right? I mean,
Correct.
that's-
Correct.
Yes.
So it's a little confusing, but the money is escrowed.
Yes.
And I know you've made a suggestion that the money can be, for the Rittenhouse Road sidewalks, can be given to the township, but I would save that for a later request.
you wouldn't allow that to be requested today?
Well,
I would prefer not. I think this
yeah.
is a separate application for the storage building. The Rittenhouse Road money, I believe, is part of the original land development application for the expansion of the main principal structure on the site. I'd rather keep that separate.
Yeah. If you want to do that down the road, make that request later, but that, that paragraph D, instead of Adams Avenue sidewalk construction, that should be revised to read
Rittenhouse Road, correct.
Deferral. But the contribution in lieu of doing that, I would make that request down the road as part of the original land development plan from 2013.
With the change of ownership that happened, the phases are unknown. So we're aware that deferrals, items we are deferring, such as landscaping trees, they will be put in if the phases don't go through. But because of the Rittenhouse, our goal was to have that in fee, the escrow to be in fee of lieu of, versus having it be due December 31st, 2016. This is because the Rittenhouse Road does not allow a smooth transition for sidewalks to be installed. And if the township were to come and demolish any part of Rittenhouse to reconstruct it, whatever money we put in or build would potentially have to be redone.
Yeah. So I think we understand what you're asking, but I think and Tim's recommendation is not to deal with that tonight. So if you want to release that escrow money to the township in a separate written request, he could put that in writing. But for tonight's approval, you're slowing it down by debating this.
I apologize.
It ought to just, that paragraph should be revised to read Rittenhouse remains deferred. You can always make a request a month from now, but I think that it needs to be looked at by the township engineer and see whether that's money that was set aside to do the 460 feet of sidewalk, right?
Yes, the township currently has that now, the escrow.
Right, but it's allocated for Rittenhouse Road.
Correct.
So make that request later, but I would not recommend that the board add that to this approval at this point. So the other conditions in the approval resolution are compliance with the Woodrow Associates letter, and then the waivers, compliance with any other applicable ordinances, and then execution of agreements in the usual form and approved by the township.
Correct. Not to remain on this topic too much longer, but if December 31st, 2016 comes along, with that being deferred until that date, it would be required for my client to install those sidewalks.
I guess my point would be that if we get to September 2016 and you haven't pursued the other phases of the original land development approval, we could consider another evaluation of Rittenhouse Road improvements at that time, as opposed to trying to mix the land development approval currently in place with this application for a storage shed.
And I don't think the township would require you to put the sidewalks in, only to have them tore out down the road. So that, I don't think you need to, that's not a risk. But you can make that, if you want to release that money, as Mr. Woodrow said, a year from now, make the request at that time.
When you, can you specify release the money? Because the township currently has the escrow.
Yeah, but it's subject to an agreement, so it would have to be released from the requirements of that agreement. Right now, it's allocated, it's there to guarantee that you put the sidewalks in. And if you don't want to do that, then you could say, township, here's the money for the sidewalks, for your sidewalk fund. So it's just releasing it from the requirements of the land development approval and whatever agreement's in place.
Okay.
Are there any questions or comments from the board before we move forward? Generally, we take the waiver separately before we look at the whole project. Considering that, are there any questions or comments from the board before we move, or sorry, from the audience before we move forward? Okay, seeing none, let's start with the waiver. Is there a motion to grant waivers under section 123-9 .c 1A that would allow this project to be reviewed as a minor land development? Is there a motion?
Motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That would allow us to then bypass that second requested waiver. Is that accurate?
You would still have to.
The concurrent preliminary.
Doesn't allow, if the waiver is granted for that section, then the waiver need not be considered.
Correct, correct.
Okay. So moving on, is there a motion to approve a waiver to section 123-32 to allow the land development without storm sewers and curbs along Rittenhouse Road?
Motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. And then there is a request for a waiver for section, is there a motion to approve, rather, a request of a waiver for section 123-10.A2C and 123-146B6C involving erosion and sediment control plans, landscape plan, and replacement of trees, deferring that until December 31st of 2016.
Motion.
And the Rittenhouse Road sidewalks.
Can we add the Rittenhouse Road sidewalks to that as well?
Yes.
Okay, adding Rittenhouse Road sidewalk deferral to that.
I'll make that motion.
Still make the motion, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, and then back to item 3E. Is there a motion to grant preliminary final plan approval for Tier Point Minor Land Development, 1000 Adams Avenue, LD 15-01?
Make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 3F on the agenda, discussion and consideration of preliminary final approval for Sycamore Farms lot line change. That's at 18 Pheasant Road, and that's S14-03. Mike?
Thank you. This is a minor lot line change. It's basically down for 18 Pheasant. It's the Kip Stewart project, otherwise known as Sycamore Farms. Basically, it's a lot line to accommodate a wall that had been built and it encroaches on the other property line. They are basically the estate of one of the parties is wanting to memorialize this in a proper fashion, and that's why they are coming forth to us tonight to get a plan to accommodate the constructed wall. Mr. Rubenstein is representing the applicant.
Good evening. I believe Mike has pretty much given you the facts. The Mary Louise Kipp passed away in May of 2013. She's the owner of what's known as Parcel B on the plan. And Charles and Nancy Stewart are the owners of Parcel C on the plan. And I'm representing all of them this evening in order to honor this arrangement that was made with the Stewarts by Ms. Kipp before she passed away. The Parcel A describes the triangular section that will be removed from the Kipp property and added to the Stewart property, contains 8,755 square feet. Your Planning Commission recommended approval. The County Planning Commission recommended approval. Tim Woodrow's letter contains some conditions which are acceptable. There are no waivers or deferrals requested, and we would ask for your approval, subject to the conditions set out in Tim Woodrow's letter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Woodrow, anything additional we need to know?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a very simple application. Obviously, some estate planning taking place here. My only concerns were to assure we have new deeds prepared and legal descriptions recorded to memorialize what we're doing through a plan so that the deeds reflect that in the future.
And that's acceptable to both parties.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That being said, is there a motion to grant preliminary final plan approval for Sycamore Farms lot line change 18 Pheasant Road? That's S14-03, subject to the conditions put forth in the review letter by Mr. Woodrow.
Make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments? Questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. By way of announcements, the Sewer Authority will meet actually on April 15th. I believe it might say the 8th on your agenda. They had to push that back this month, so that will be on the 15th at 7:30. Our Parks and Rec Board will meet on April 14th at 7 p.m. The Library Board of Trustees will meet April 20th at 7 p.m. And the Business Development Committee is hosting a business roundtable on April 29th. Business owners, developers, and brokers interested in taking part in this informal discussion should contact Bill Roth at broth@lowerprovidence.org. Comments and other business. Do we have a student rep report this evening?
Next Friday, the 11th, there's a blood drive at the high school from 2:30 to 7. We'd really appreciate it if you come out and donate.
Thank you very much, Haley. Any comments from the board? Staff?
The only, and maybe I missed it, but we've got a opening on the Sewer Authority Board. I didn't know if you wanted to handle that tonight, or maybe I missed it, you already handled it.
No, the one applicant that we have is in our board packet, but it's the first time our folks have seen it, so I think that if we're going to move forward with that, we'll do it for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Chief, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have three quick announcements of three upcoming events. On April 19th, Saturday, April 19th, between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., the police department is collaborating with Representative Mike Vera who's holding a shredder and drug take-back event, and that will be held at the IBEW Local 380 facility at the intersection of Ridge Pike and Cross Keys Road, again from 9 to 11 on April 19th. The following Saturday, we'll be conducting an independent drug take-back program here at the Township Building between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. The DEA previously organized and sponsored those programs. They've decided to step away from it, so the district attorney's offices in Bucks County, Montgomery County have decided to encourage their law enforcement agencies to continue with it, and they will take care of the actual disposal that the DEA used to handle. So again, that's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on April 26th. The following Monday, April 27th, a little more solemn occasion in conjunction with the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office Hero Plaque Program. We'll be dedicating a plaque in memory of Chief John J. Culp of the Lower Providence Township Police Department, who died in the line of duty on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1963. That plaque dedication will be here at the Township Building at the police entrance, and that will begin at 9:30 a.m. Very solemn occasion for our officers, and we'd like to cordially invite any community members. Long time ago, but we just want to ensure the community, our officers, the law enforcement community, and those who may have had some contact or some relationship with Chief Culp's family, that we will not forget his service or his sacrifice.
Thank you very much, Chief. Comments from the audience? Please come forward.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, and Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you. You opened up our alternate for us. So it'll be nice, and by you not voting on the sign, you're not going to monkey around with 143, so she won't have to worry about looking on all pages being changed. You also, I think, have another applicant that was sent to you, a Mr. Pusey, that has been a township resident since 1982. He's on the Lower Providence Ambulance Community Center Board of Directors. I think it also, we've always had two alternates, Mr. Chairman, so if the board considers it, it'd be a nice idea to have two.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we've reached out to him twice by phone and email, and he has not yet responded. So we'd like to entertain his application, but we'd also like to hear directly from him. So if you
Super,
can reach
thank
out
you.
to him for me, please.
And I'd also like to thank you, too, for not voting on the sign on Arcola property, because that's an R1 district, and if you would have advertised that and voted on it, I think it would have strapped the zoning board's hands with all R1 districts. You know, we just turned down an AT&T antenna on an R1 district. And I'd hate to see all those people, about 95 of them that signed a petition, come in and start shooting at you guys. Thank you.
I saw at least one other hand in the back. Perhaps two.
Tom said some of what I wanted to say. Mr. Sergini and Mrs. Ekman, I'd like to thank you and the rest of the board for being silent on this sign ordinance. So thank you for that.
Ms. Altieri, then Mr. Palmer.
Marie Altieri. It's just really a question and a clarification, and I apologize if I didn't hear if there was any questions after the library presentation. I guess my question is why it wasn't approved or or the letter wasn't written because of budget comment. It reads, no structural or other alterations that would significantly change the design and appearance of the building being undertaken by the library. And basically, it's not altering any of the exterior, which I know the township is responsible for, and it's only adding a couple drywall, like for those private rooms. And it's self-funded. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have any, it's not depending on the township, to fund the money. So it's a question, being new on the library board and having a little bit of a background. And the budget too, I know it's more by square footage and pretty, it's not really detailed, and it won't be detailed. And they'll give you what they have, but I just thought it was pretty simple, and just for my education.
Sure, and I can answer that. On my agenda and in my board packet, I have update on renovations to the Lower Providence Community Library. I don't have approval of any plans for the library. So the first that I've seen of it was tonight. I don't know about anybody else, but the fact that we have to approve that, the fact that their funding is also intimately tied to ours, for us to see it and vote on it tonight, it would have been a pretty quick turnaround. So I thought we were getting an update on possible renovations. I did not realize she was coming for approval.
Well, am I, just for me, again, too, is that, so the floor plan isn't even in your packet, like to see?
No, it was on the, up here when we sat down.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the first we've seen it.
Okay, so
When we
for
sat
me
down.
to take back information to the board, what would you need?
Talk to us in advance. We get our board packets. We are easily able to be contacted, so that would have made a difference tonight. So just whatever their plan is, whatever, we have an architectural rendering, but what does it involve? What are the costs associated with it? What's the budget? Provide us the information for the project.
Perhaps they could ask to be on the next meeting if they're ready.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
2 weeks.
but for your packets, do you, like ahead of time, I mean, you're saying that this was put on tonight when you walked in, right?
Correct.
So for your packets for next month,
It would be great to see it.
to see
Yeah.
this included with a budget,
Correct.
and that's it?
Yes.
Do you need a text, like a description of what's going on, or that
No, I think
presentation
we
was
saw it
okay?
this evening, so just a
Okay.
general overview of the associated costs together with the drawings.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Comroe, you're up next, then Ms. Albach.
A very quick comment. Mr. Sorgini, I'd like to thank you and the rest of the board members for allowing that sign ordinance to die. It should never come up to before the township for the second time, and that's all I'm going to say at this point. It died, and I thank you very much for it.
Mr. Comroe?
Oh, I thought
No,
you said
no,
something.
thank you.
Candy Alaba, Eagleville Road. As a resident on Eagleville Road, I would like to thank you for letting the sign ordinance die. The residents that are directly in conflict with the school district have tolerated a lot from the school district. And what the board need to realize, to put in an LED sign would have a massive impact on the house that's across the street. I mean, I made a comment at the Planning Commission, if you change the zoning to RD2, would I be allowed to put in an LED sign in my front yard with my address on it so everybody would be able to find my house, but I would impact the neighbor directly across the street. I think what needs to happen is the township needs to clear up the lawsuit against the zoning board that was put into effect because the school district didn't get their way 3 years ago. I have constantly asked the school board the status of this lawsuit. I get no answers. I've got more answers from the township than I have the school district. I think if the school district, they have a sign that's sitting there. It's sitting right next to the exit driveway. It's been there, I don't know how long, I guess since the school was built. They can move that onto the corner. It says Arcola Middle School. They could put Skyview on the top. It's less impact. Financially, it would save the taxpayers a lot of money, because 3 years ago, the price for that sign was $25,000, not including the design and the legal fees. And they want to put them at 4 other schools. They could better use the money to fix the roof at Eagleville or the roof at Arrowhead instead of, if they want to get their information out, the township has a very nice access channel. The school district needs to access that channel. They can get their information out. They have a number of other ways in this world to get their information out. But I think it alleviates a lot of problems, eliminating that side, and I would like to thank you for erring on the side of caution and not approving that at this time. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Mr. Borai? Third time's a charm.
You get 3 strikes on your indicator, you're out, right? I just want to congratulate John for his Pinetown Road and the board. They're scarifying it, and it looks like they're going to be working on it. And
They're going to be, and
what a relief it is.
Supervisor Ekman made sure tonight to request that information be sent out to everyone, so hopefully that will go out tomorrow.
Who did that?
Colleen.
Nice job. The other question is seeing we have a legalized sign out front. This is the sign from 2000. It was January 13, 08. It's got our beloved chief of police on it, and Charlie DeFrancesco, and Joe Dunbar, and Senator Rafferty, and it says, "Thank you, Senator Rafferty, for your support." That sign was donated by Rafferty, as I think you all know, for a $35,000 grant. I think what Bill ought to do is put up tomorrow, "Thank you, supervisors, for your support." That would be a nice little get to. The other thing I'd like to ask is Rittenhouse Road. I've been hearing that since 1974 with sidewalks. There are no sidewalks on Rittenhouse Road. And I have paperwork that's ready to go to the trash company, and I'm more happy to give it to you, where they were talking about closing Rittenhouse Road. When Mr. Nielsen decides on open up Adams Avenue to tie into his shopping center, they swore that they were going to close Rittenhouse because it's a dangerous curve, dangerous getting out and getting in. So it's just something, every time I come and I hear Rittenhouse Road on sidewalks, I'm sure you folks get tired of hearing about it too. But when you make a builder come in and put escrow money down for a sidewalk that's never going to be put in, it's ridiculous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any final comments? Okay. Seeing none, I'll just mention that our next business meeting will be held April 16th, back on our regularly scheduled Thursday evening. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion, second. Second, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. For all of our residents who will be celebrating holidays over the weekend, have a happy holiday.